I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Law. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that teach us all about the law. Sometimes how it's made, how it's broken, how it's enforced, how it works, and how it doesn't work. We bring interesting guests who have some expertise in a segment of the law because we think that you as citizens have a right to know where your taxpayer dollars are going. Today is a real treat for me. I'm interviewing Eric Sparr, our current Winnebago County District Attorney. At one time I practiced law with his father and got to know his mother, who left the practice I was with and started his own practice, and he's done so well. He's retired, and he's 20 years younger than I am. So that tells you there's some genes with brains in that family. And we're going to talk to Eric today to find out, well, first of all, Eric, your middle initial is D, correct?
That's right.
Are you named after your dad, David Sparr?
I am, and it was the same with him and his father.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You have been a public servant, attorney, ever since you really got out of law school, and in part while you were still in law school, and you've held every position in the district attorney's office. Tell us what they are and what the difference is.
Sure. So after my second year of law school, I'd interned in the DA's office and did not appreciate at the time I was setting myself up to come back, but that's absolutely what happened. And so when I finished in 2005, there were a couple of spots open, and I started essentially as soon as I had graduated. Was an assistant DA until 2020. January of that year became deputy DA, and then in May of 2022 became DA. So I've gone through each of those spots, and some things about each of those spots are very different, and some things are very much the same. I still have a caseload. I'm not doing quite as many cases as I used to, but that's one thing that was really important to me to keep doing even in these other positions.
Well, that's interesting that the district attorney's philosophy today is different than it was 62 years ago when I got out of law school. At that time, if you could catch on as a district attorney or an assistant district attorney, you tried cases for 2 years, lost almost all of them because you really weren't qualified or experienced, and as soon as you had learned some trial skills at the public's expense, then you went into practice for yourself. But now there's a career professionalism.
So there was a change that the state made, and historically the prosecutor positions were county funded. So all the assistant DAs were county employees. They had salaries that varied widely from county to county, and a long time ago now, before I had started as a prosecutor, that changed and the state took those positions over. So all of the prosecutors now are state positions. Our office is a little unique, and DA's offices generally are unique in Wisconsin because the lawyers are state employees, but the other people, so paralegals or investigators or victim witness personnel, they're county employees. So we have this split funding source, and we have to, when we want something, we have to go to two places is really what it comes down to.
Well, historically, a lot of people have left public jobs like district attorney and even judges because of a lack of money. Who sets the salaries?
So that's set by the state, and that is actually right now there is a proposal in the upcoming budgetary cycle to increase pay for prosecutors, assistant DAs specifically, and state public defenders who are in a similar situation. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it seems we're in really, right now it's a crisis, and it's been a problem for a long time, but it's worse now for probably a combination of reasons. But this is the first time since I've been here where it felt realistic that there might be some significant change on the horizon as far as addressing pay in a positive way for prosecutors.
Well, it's a crisis where some counties don't even have a prosecutor, am I correct?
Right. There was a county a few months ago that was down to zero. I think they have a prosecutor now. There's a county that as of next week is going to have no prosecutors, and I believe that they were supposed to have 5 positions. So it's impacting a lot of counties around the state, but a few of them to an even greater degree such that they can't really function. We are down, we normally have 12 lawyers. We have 10 right now. So it's hitting us, but not the way it's hitting some of these counties. And we have 2 of our 10 lawyers are relatively new. So we're fortunate in that we have a number of experienced lawyers as well. Historically, we've dodged a lot of the personnel problems that some counties have had. And we had, I think originally, just kind of by dumb luck, we got a few of the right people in place, and that made it easier to bring some other people in. And it created kind of this family really in the office. And we've kept people longer than prosecutors have stuck around in most offices in the state.
Well, that's important, to have experienced people who know exactly what's required to handle the volume, and it takes money. These people have expenses, they have families, and they have careers, and they don't want to be stuck in a dead end, and you can't blame them.
It's a challenge in that historically the problem for prosecutors and public defenders and other government lawyers as well was that the private sector paid more. And so people would leave public sector to go private. Now, the pay for prosecutors and public defenders has stagnated to the degree that other government lawyers make significantly more money. And that's one of the things actually that our state prosecutor's office relied on in trying to push for increased pay, was to compare to other government positions and to say these positions are not even competitive with government positions at this point. So something needs to get done. And we actually, at 2 of our more recent departures, left for city attorney's offices, so other government positions, for significantly more money.
Well, what about the public defenders? Are there some areas that don't have those either?
They have similar problems. Our public defender's office is down people right now. I'm not as familiar with the numbers around the state, but they are missing a lot of personnel, and they have a lot of open spots around the public defender's office too. So their salary structure is very similar to ours, and they're facing a lot of the same problems.
Well, as then Senator Hubert Humphrey told me more than 60 years ago, things iron themselves out if somebody's ironing. But it sounds to me like we have a shortage of ironers. We're going to take our first break, and we'll come back and talk about some specifics. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm George Curtis, and this is our District Attorney, Eric Sparr. And when I finished talking much too much in the last segment, Eric, I mentioned that I sense a caring professional as opposed to a mercenary, a scalp hunter. You want to defend yourself?
Well, fair enough. One of the things that is funny, and I've confused some people, because when I go into a meeting or something like that and I introduce myself, I don't use a title. I say my name and I say I'm from the DA's office. And occasionally we'll get 10 minutes into the conversation and then they still don't understand. They say, well, what do you do there? And then it leads to an awkward explanation. But I feel strange coming on that way. I don't want somebody to treat me a certain way because of a title. I want them to treat me a certain way because I've said something meaningful. That said, I still want people to understand that when I walk into a gathering of a bunch of different disciplines and I say, hey, well, I can commit the DA's office to this, that I actually can commit them to it, so that's important to be able to convey as well. But I think my approach to this is it's just kind of been a natural progression for me, where I started as a prosecutor, I had a lot of cases, and sometimes there were problems that came up with those cases that I would see repeatedly. And going back, this is probably maybe 13 years ago, I was handling a lot of drug cases, and we had a problem where people were using drugs. We wanted to get them services, to push services on them, basically, but also to give them a chance to avoid long-term implications of a conviction. And we didn't really have an option that did that at the time. And so I was kind of complaining about that to my supervisor, and he said, well, create a program. And I thought, well, I didn't want to do more work on this. I just wanted to complain about it. But we put together a program, we wrote a grant, and we put in place this program that facilitated those things I mentioned. And it still survives, actually, in almost the same form today. But that was kind of the beginning of just spotting a problem like this and trying to figure out, how do we resolve it? And that was something, for me, I was doing that didn't care what my role was. It wasn't part of my job to do that, but I saw a problem and we started to fix it. Actually, just today, I got a text. I work with the warming shelter. I'm on the board there, and I got a call that one of the people that I know because I prosecuted him, and he's been a long-term guest there, and they're having a problem with him. And they said, "Are you free to come over?" I said, "No, I've got to go do an interview." But I think after this, I'm probably going to try to help deal with that. So I still, even in regardless of what my role says my job is, or what the specific requirements of it are, there are lots of things that I do that are not directly connected to that, and I do them because they make sense.
Well, you're a branch of government. All of us like some of the services of government. None of us like the government telling us what to do. The fuel that energizes the government is money. And it takes money to make the programs work, to keep the best people. And interestingly, one of your challenges is educating the public that it's going to take more money to keep good people doing important jobs, or they're going to have a lousy, dysfunctional government, including your agency.
Sure. We certainly don't want to have somebody coming just out of law school and being handed a murder case. That's not going to lead to good outcomes for anyone, for victims' families, for the court system, or frankly for defendants. That's not how it should be set up. And the problem, if the budget issues don't get addressed, is we're approaching something closer to that. That's a little bit of an extreme example. And I think that the budget issue, though, too, sometimes we talk about budget for programming or for different initiatives that are, it requires kind of a long-term view to see the value in them, because in the short term, this is going to cost money to implement. But in the long term, what is the savings? It could be saving jail time or prison time, or saving people from having to go through the court system, and that's costly as well. So part of what we have to do is make sure people are evaluating all of that and taking the long-term view. And in a lot of situations, we've had very good luck from my office and from other criminal justice system actors in convincing our county board to do that. And they've funded some programs, such as the drug court, that in the short term are costing money, but in the long term are saving the county financially and saving other things too. Having somebody in drug court is a much more humane outcome than prison. And if the results are as good or better than the prison system, then it's a no-brainer to do that.
And I'll bet, and I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm simply betting with that approach, you have met many people on the street who you prosecuted, and perhaps got some lockup time for them, who met you, respected you, and thanked you. They don't all hate you.
That has definitely happened. I mean, I can think of at least a short list that really dislike me. But what's interesting about it, and I've had this conversation with a lot of other prosecutors, some prosecutors say, I don't want to live where I work. And I can't imagine not living where I work. And I explain, well, I run into people fairly regularly, and usually they're more likely to figure out who I am than I am to figure out who they are. And usually that leads to a pretty positive interaction. And I think part of it is that, not that they felt like they got some great deal or something like that, but the fact that they went through this process, and that I'm doing a job, I'm not doing something personal against them, and that I can do my job being a jerk, or I can do it without being a jerk. And I think probably most of them would say that I wasn't. But it's more about how people are treated when they go through the system, and they remember that as much as they remember the outcome.
I agree with you. I've done litigation for 62, 63 years. Have had lots of fights and jury trials and things like that. And it really discombobulates people if you're nice to them. You got 1 minute left. Why don't you tell the people what you want them to do about the DA's job?
Well, I don't know. I think one of the things about prosecution, it's not like the movies. It's not necessarily the way that people envision that it would be. And I think that we have to take a realistic view of this, that we have to treat people like human beings. We have to take realistic approaches to things. We have to work with a lot of partners in the community to make that happen. And those are things that people in my office historically have done a really good job of, and those are things that have been pretty natural to me over time. And I guess that's why I'm still there, or I probably would have left and gone somewhere else. So for now, I'm still there. I'm still there at least for 2 more years, and then I have to run again. And so I hope that people think I'm doing a good job of those things when I run in 2024.
Well, some people will and some people won't. But when you go home, if you've got a partner in life and she thinks you're all right, and you've got a dog, dogs are very reliable no matter what your job is. Eric,
right.
Congratulations and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.